Some people say true love is about the happy moments. I learned it's about staying when every fiber of your being tells you to run. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 78 years old now, living in this little house in Burlington, Vermont. The same house where I discovered the truth about my marriage 53 years ago. The same house where I made the hardest decision of my life. You see this ring? It's worn thin now, just like my hands. But I never took it off. Not even on that terrible winter day in 1972 when my world shattered into a million pieces. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The air had that bone-deep chill that Vermont winters are famous for. Snow had been falling steadily since dawn, covering everything in a pristine white blanket. The children, I had 3 back then, Jimmy was 10, Rosie was 8, and little Thomas was just 5. They were over at my sister-in-law Martha's house building snowmen and drinking hot cocoa. I'd spent the morning at the winter farmers market in town where I sold my knitted scarves and mittens. Back then, every penny counted. Robert, my husband, worked at the lumber mill, but with 3 growing children and the mortgage on our little 2-bedroom house, we needed every bit of extra income we could scrape together. I'd love to know where you're watching this from. The world has gotten so much smaller since I was young. Please leave a comment telling me where you're from. It warms this old heart to know my story is reaching folks far beyond my little corner of Vermont. That day, I remember feeling so proud walking home from the market. I'd sold every last pair of mittens and had a nice wad of cash tucked into my coat pocket. I was thinking about how I could surprise Robert with a new thermos for his lunch pail. His old one had started leaking, and the poor man was having cold coffee with his lunch. Our house wasn't anything special by today's standards. A small white clapboard with blue shutters, set back from the road with 2 big maple trees in the front yard. But it was ours, and we'd worked hard for it. As I trudged through the snow up our walkway, I noticed Robert's truck in the driveway. That was odd. He wasn't supposed to be home from the mill until evening. I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well. There was a nasty bout of flu going around that winter, and I worried he might have caught it. So I hurried inside, stomping the snow off my boots on the porch. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. Usually, if Robert was home, the radio would be playing. He loved his baseball games and news programs. "Robert?" I called out, unwinding my scarf from around my neck. "Are you home, dear?" No answer came, but I heard a creak from upstairs, our bedroom. Even now, after all these decades, this part is difficult to talk about. Your heart knows things before your mind can accept them. Mine knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into that house. There was a perfume in the air that wasn't mine, something floral and heavy. And there were 2 teacups on the kitchen table, one with lipstick on the rim. Bright red lipstick. I never wore red. As I climbed those stairs, each step felt like I was walking to my own execution. My hand trembled as I reached for our bedroom doorknob. For a moment, I stood there, frozen. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk back downstairs, and pretend I'd never come home early. But another part, the part that had to know, pushed me forward. I opened the door. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. This was mine. There, in our bed, the same bed where our youngest son was conceived, the same bed where we'd spent thousands of nights side by side, was Robert. And with him was Sarah Miller, my best friend since high school. They didn't hear me at first. I made no sound as I stood there, watching them scramble for clothes, watching their faces change from passion to shock to shame. It was like watching a film at the movie theater, something happening to someone else. "Margaret," Robert finally gasped, pulling the sheet up. I thought you were at the market until 3. I remember how absurd that statement seemed. As if the problem was my schedule, not his betrayal. Sarah wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the floor as she hastily buttoned her blouse. My best friend. The woman who had held my hand through each of my childbirths. The woman who had brought us meals when Robert threw out his back 2 summers ago and couldn't work for a month. The woman who knew all my secrets, my hopes, my fears. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things like women did in the movies. I simply turned around, closed the door behind me, and walked downstairs to the kitchen. I sat at the table, next to those 2 teacups, and stared out the window at the falling snow. Sarah left without saying goodbye. I heard the back door close, heard her car start up and drive away. Robert came down about 10 minutes later, his face ashen, his eyes red-rimmed. "Maggie," he started, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to say." "How long?" I asked, still staring out the window. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, detached, like it belonged to someone else. "It doesn't matter," he mumbled. I turned to look at him then. "It matters to me." 6 months, he finally admitted. "It started last summer when you took the kids to your mother's for 2 weeks. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of them laughing behind my back, of shared secrets, of betrayal." "Do you love her?" I asked. I needed to know everything, all at once, like ripping off a bandage. Robert couldn't answer at first. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, looking older than his 36 years. "I don't know," he finally said. "I think I might." Those words cut deeper than anything else could have. Not the physical betrayal, but the emotional one. The thought that he had given his heart, the heart I thought belonged to me, to our family, to someone else. I twisted my wedding ring around my finger, a nervous habit I'd developed over the years. I had every right to take it off, to throw it at him, to walk out that door and never look back. That's what my mother would have done. That's what any self-respecting woman in 1972 should have done. But I didn't. You might be wondering why. Why I didn't kick him out right then and there. Why I didn't make a scene. The truth is complicated. We had 3 children who adored their father. We had a mortgage. In 1972, a divorced woman with 3 kids had few prospects, but it was more than practical concerns that kept that ring on my finger. As I sat there in our kitchen, with the evidence of their afternoon tea and infidelity before me, Robert looking like a whipped dog, I realized something. Despite everything, despite the pain that was only beginning to register, I still loved him. 12 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising children and struggling to make ends meet. You don't just turn that off like a faucet. And there was something else, something I noticed as he stood there waiting for my verdict. Robert was coughing, not just clearing his throat from nervousness, but deep, rattling coughs that seemed to come from his very core. "How long have you had that cough?" I asked, momentarily distracted from our marital crisis. He waved it off. "A couple weeks. It's nothing, just the dust at the mill." But I knew my husband. I'd been watching him lose weight, coming home more tired than usual. I'd attributed it to working overtime, to the stress of providing for our family during the cold winter months when heating bills skyrocketed. "Have you seen Dr. Merrill about it?" I pressed. "I don't need a doctor for a cough, Margaret," he snapped, then immediately looked contrite. "I'm sorry. I have no right to be short with you. Not today of all days. If you're finding something valuable in my story, would you mind hitting that like button? And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd be ever so grateful if you did. At my age, it's a blessing to be able to share these life lessons with all of you wonderful people." What happened next changed everything. As Robert stood there in our kitchen, waiting for me to tell him to leave, to scream, to fall apart, he started coughing again. This time, he couldn't stop. He doubled over, gripping the counter to steady himself, and when he pulled his handkerchief away from his mouth, I saw what he'd been hiding from me. Blood, bright red against the white cotton. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a cough from the mill. This was something far worse. That moment in our kitchen, seeing the blood on Robert's handkerchief, is frozen in time for me. It's strange how life works. One minute, your biggest problem is your husband's betrayal, and the next, you're terrified you might lose him forever. "Robert," I whispered, rising from my chair. "How long have you been coughing up blood?" His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "A few weeks. It's nothing, Maggie. Just a bad cold." But we both knew it wasn't nothing. The color had drained from his face, and not just from the shame of being caught with Sarah. There was fear there too, the kind of fear a man feels when his body begins to betray him. "We're going to Dr. Merrill." "Now," I said, already reaching for my coat that I'd just taken off. "Margaret, please," he protested. "We need to talk about what you saw upstairs." I remember looking at him. This man I'd loved since I was 19 years old. This man who had just broken my heart, and feeling something shift inside me. The betrayal was still there, raw and painful, but something else was taking precedence. "The only thing we need to talk about right now is getting you to a doctor," I said firmly. "Whatever else is happening between us can wait." He tried to argue, but another coughing fit silenced him. This one worse than before. I held his arm as he bent over, his whole body shaking with the effort. When it passed, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm scared, Maggie," he admitted, his voice barely audible. In that moment, he wasn't my unfaithful husband. He was just a frightened man facing his own mortality, and I was still his wife. "I know," I said. "I'm scared too, but we'll face it together." I don't know why I said that. It just came out, natural as breathing. Maybe it was habit after 12 years of marriage. Maybe it was because I couldn't imagine not being by his side when something was so obviously wrong. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew that what was coming would be bigger than his affair, bigger than my hurt pride, bigger than both of us. Dr. Merrill's office was usually closed on Saturdays, but he lived above his practice, and I knew he'd see us. He delivered all 3 of our children. Back then, doctors were part of the community in a way that's hard to find these days. He took one look at Robert, heard the cough, saw the blood, and his face grew serious. He listened to Robert's lungs, asked about night sweats, weight loss, fatigue, all things I'd noticed but hadn't pieced together. "I want to send you to Burlington for some tests," Dr. Merrill finally said, removing his stethoscope. "There's a specialist there, Dr. Reinhardt. I'll telephone him right now." The waiting room was silent as Dr. Merrill stepped out to make the call. Robert sat hunched over, staring at his hands. I stood by the window, watching snow pile up on the street outside. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally. "What happened with Sarah? It was stupid. Selfish. I didn't turn from the window. Why her? Why my best friend?" It was the question that had been burning in my mind since I opened that bedroom door. Of all the women in our small town, why did it have to be Sarah? Robert sighed. "She was there. When you took the kids to your mother's last summer, I was so lonely. Sarah stopped by with a casserole, said she thought I might be missing home cooking. We got to talking. She seemed interested in me, in what I had to say. It had been so long since I felt that. "I've been interested in you every day of our marriage," I said, my voice tight with anger and hurt. "I've listened to you. I've supported you. I've loved you." "I know," he whispered. "That's what makes it worse. I had everything right in front of me, and I still looked elsewhere. I don't expect you to forgive me, Maggie. I don't deserve it." Before I could respond, Dr. Merrill returned. "Dr. Reinhardt will see you Monday morning. He's cleared his schedule. I've told him it's urgent." The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Robert slept in the spare room. The children came home, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred in their parents' marriage. I made dinner, helped with homework, tucked them into bed, all the normal routines of our life, while feeling like I was moving through a thick fog. Sunday night, after the children were asleep, Robert came to find me in the kitchen. I was baking bread, something I always did when I needed to think. The rhythmic kneading helped clear my head. "Margaret," he said, standing in the doorway, "I need to tell you something before tomorrow." I continued kneading the dough, not looking up. "What is it?" If it's bad news, I want you to know that I'll understand if you want me to leave. After what I've done, you don't owe me anything." I finally looked up at him. In the soft kitchen light, I could see how much weight he'd lost. His shirt collar hung loose around his neck, and his cheeks were hollow. "Robert Wilson," I said, flour dusting my hands as I placed them on my hips. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what the doctor will say, and I sure as hell don't know what's going to happen with our marriage. But I do know one thing. I am not making any decisions about our future until we know what we're facing. Do you understand me?" He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Yes, ma'am." It was the first normal moment we'd had since I opened that bedroom door. Monday morning dawned clear and bitter cold. We drove to Burlington in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The specialist's office was in a big brick building near the hospital. Dr. Reinhardt was a tall, thin man with kind eyes behind thick glasses. The examination was thorough. Blood tests, x-rays, more listening to Robert's lungs. Hours of waiting in sterile rooms, flipping through old magazines, avoiding each other's eyes. Finally, Dr. Reinhardt called us both into his office. I'll never forget his exact words. "Mr. Wilson, I'm afraid the X-rays show a significant mass in your right lung. Given your symptoms and the appearance on the X-ray, I believe we're looking at advanced lung cancer." The room seemed to tilt around me. Cancer. In 1972, that word was practically a death sentence. Especially lung cancer, especially advanced. "What are my chances?" Robert asked, his voice surprisingly steady. Dr. Reinhardt removed his glasses, polishing them with his handkerchief, a gesture I recognized as buying time to frame a difficult truth. Without treatment, perhaps 3 to 6 months. With aggressive treatment, surgery, radiation, we might extend that to a year, possibly 2. I won't lie to you, Mr. Wilson, the prognosis is not good. A year, maybe 2. The man sitting next to me, the father of my children, my husband of 12 years, the man who had just betrayed me in the most painful way possible, had 12 to 24 months to live, at best. I reached for Robert's hand. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. My hand just found his, our fingers intertwining as they had thousands of times before. "What do we do next?" I asked Dr. Reinhardt, feeling Robert's grip tighten on mine. The drive home was different than the drive there. Robert stared out the window, watching the Vermont landscape slide by. I kept my eyes on the road, my mind racing with practicalities. How would we pay for treatment? What would we tell the children? How would Robert continue working at the mill? "You should call Sarah," I said finally, breaking the long silence. Robert's head snapped toward me. "What?" "You should call Sarah," I repeated. "Tell her about the diagnosis. End things properly. Margaret, I'm not saying this for her benefit," I interrupted. "I'm saying it for yours, and for mine. If we're going to fight this together, and we are going to fight it, Robert, then I need to know that chapter is closed. Completely closed." He nodded slowly. "It already is. The moment I saw the blood on that handkerchief, I realized what a fool I'd been. Risking everything we have, everything we've built, for something so meaningless." I kept my eyes on the road, but I felt tears threatening. "Was it meaningless, Robert? You said you might love her." He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, softly, "I was confused, Maggie, flattered by her attention. But it wasn't love. What I feel for you, that's love. Standing by me today, holding my hand when the doctor delivered that news, after everything I've done to hurt you, that's love." I pulled the car over to the side of the road, unable to see through my tears. All the emotions I'd been holding back since Saturday came flooding out. The betrayal, the fear, the uncertainty of our future. Robert reached for me, hesitantly at first, then pulled me into his arms across the front seat of our old Chevy. "I don't want to die, Maggie," he whispered into my hair. "I don't want to leave you and the kids. I'm so sorry. For everything." I held him as he sobbed, his body shaking against mine. Outside our car, the winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. The world was beautiful and terrible all at once. Just like life. Just like love. "We'll get through this," I promised him, not knowing if it was a promise I could keep. One day at a time. When we finally pulled back onto the road, I felt the weight of my wedding ring on my finger, the same ring I'd considered removing just 2 days before. Now, it seemed like an anchor in a storm-tossed sea, a reminder of the vows we'd made, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. We had plenty of worse ahead of us, but as we drove home to tell our children about their father's illness, I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't be taking that ring off anytime soon. If you're still with me in this story, bless your heart. It means so much that you're listening. Don't forget to hit that like button if this is touching your soul, and subscribe to hear what happened next. We all go through dark times, don't we? I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever had to make a hard choice about forgiveness in your own life. Telling the children about their father's illness was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We gathered them in the living room that evening, the 3 of them sensing something was wrong from the moment we walked through the door. "Is Daddy in trouble?" little Thomas asked, his blue eyes wide with worry. I remember exchanging a glance with Robert, wondering how to explain cancer to a 5-year-old. How do you tell children their father might not see them graduate high school, or attend their weddings, or hold his grandchildren? "I'm sick, buddy," Robert said finally, pulling Thomas onto his lap. "The kind of sick that doesn't get better quick like a cold. The doctors are going to help me, but I'll need to go to the hospital sometimes." "Are you going to die?" Rosie asked bluntly. At 8, she was already so perceptive. I watched Robert swallow hard before answering. "I'm going to fight very hard not to," he said. "But yes, this is the kind of sickness that can make people die if the medicine doesn't work." Jimmy, our eldest at 10, hadn't said a word. He just stared at his father, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. "It's not fair," he finally whispered. "It's not fair!" He bolted from the room, his footsteps pounding up the stairs, his bedroom door slamming shut behind him. Robert made to follow him, but I placed a hand on his arm. "Let me," I said. I found Jimmy face down on his bed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I sat beside him, placing my hand on his back, feeling his sharp shoulder blades through his flannel shirt. "You're right," I told him. "It's not fair. Not one bit." He rolled over, his face streaked with tears. "Why Dad? Why not somebody else's dad?" "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly. "Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's no reason for it that we can understand." "I hate it," Jimmy said fiercely. "I hate cancer." "Me too," I agreed. "But you know what? Your dad is strong, and he has something very important to fight for. You 3 kids, and me. That gives him a better chance than most." I didn't know if that was true, but I needed it to be. We all did. The next few months were a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the children. Robert underwent surgery to remove part of his right lung, followed by radiation treatments that left him weak, nauseated, and unable to work. The mill held his job, but without his paycheck, money became tight. I took on extra knitting projects, selling my items in shops as far away as Montpellier. I also began working evenings at Hartley's Diner, waiting tables after the children were in bed. Robert's mother would come stay with them, sitting in our living room, knitting and listening to the radio while the children slept upstairs. One night in April, about 3 months after Robert's diagnosis, I came home from the diner to find my mother-in-law asleep in the armchair, the radio still playing softly. I gently woke her and sent her home, then went upstairs to check on Robert. He was awake, sitting up in bed with a notebook in his lap, the bedside lamp casting a soft glow around the room. We'd moved back into the same bedroom about a month after his diagnosis. Neither of us had mentioned Sarah again after his call to her the day of the diagnosis. Some wounds heal without being talked to death, I've found. "What are you doing up so late?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. He showed me the notebook. It was filled with letters, one addressed to each of the children at different ages, 16, 18, 21, wedding day, and one addressed to me. "Just in case," he said simply. I felt my throat tighten. "You're not going anywhere, Robert Wilson." "Not if I can help it," he agreed. "But if the worst happens, I want them to know what I would have said if I'd been there." I looked at the pages, at his familiar handwriting covering the lined paper. My big, strong lumberjack of a husband, preparing for a future he might not see. "Read mine?" he asked, holding out a sealed envelope. I shook my head. "Not yet. Not until—" I couldn't finish the sentence. He nodded, understanding what I couldn't say. "Not until you're gone. How was work?" he asked, changing the subject. I kicked off my shoes with a groan. "Busy. Some convention in town has Hartley's packed to the rafters. Good for tips, though." I pulled a wad of bills from my uniform pocket and counted them. $37 tonight. "You shouldn't have to do this, Maggie," Robert said, his face drawn with guilt. "Working all day and half the night. You're exhausted." I leaned over and kissed his forehead. "So are you, and you're fighting cancer. I think I can handle slinging a few plates of meatloaf." But the truth was, I was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-weary, exhausted. Between caring for Robert, working 2 jobs, and trying to be both mother and father to the children while their dad was sick, I was running on empty. The following Sunday after church, something unexpected happened. We'd started attending services again after Robert's diagnosis, finding comfort in the community and the rituals, if not always in the theology. Pastor Simmons had just finished his sermon when he asked the congregation to remain seated for a moment. "As many of you know, our brother Robert Wilson has been battling cancer these past few months," he said. The Wilson family has been an example to us all of grace under pressure, of faith in difficult times, but they need our help. I felt Robert stiffen beside me. He'd always been proud, never one to accept charity. We've organized a work rotation, Pastor Simmons continued. The men of the church will take turns helping with repairs around the Wilson home and yard. The women have arranged a meal schedule so that Margaret doesn't have to cook after her long hours of work. I felt tears spring to my eyes as he went on, describing how the Sunday school classes had collected money to help with medical bills, how the youth group had volunteered to babysit our children whenever needed. This is what community means, Pastor Simmons concluded. Bearing one another's burdens. The Wilsons have carried this burden alone for too long. It's time we carried it with them. After the service, people surrounded us, offering hugs, handshakes, words of encouragement. Mrs. Peterson pressed a casserole into my hands. Mr. Jackson told Robert he'd be by Tuesday to fix the leaky roof we hadn't had time or money to address. As we drove home, Robert was quiet, staring out the window. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching for his hand across the seat. "I never thought," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought people would rally around us like this. After what I did." I squeezed his hand. "They don't know about Sarah, Robert." "But you do," he said, turning to look at me. "And you're still here, still fighting alongside me. I don't deserve you, Maggie." "Maybe not," I said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." The community support made a world of difference in the months that followed. The practical help was invaluable, but even more precious was the knowledge that we weren't alone. The emotional burden lightened, shared among many shoulders, rather than just mine. By summer, Robert had finished his radiation treatments. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The tumor had shrunk significantly. He was still weak, still too thin, but there was color in his cheeks again, and he could play with the children for short periods without becoming winded. July brought a heat wave that had everyone in Vermont seeking shade and cool water. We took the children to Lake Champlain one Sunday after church, spreading our picnic blanket under a huge maple tree near the shore. I watched as Robert waded into the shallow water with Thomas, holding our youngest son's hands as he jumped over small waves. Rosie was building an elaborate sandcastle nearby, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Jimmy, always the adventurous one, was swimming further out, occasionally calling for his father to watch his dives. A year ago, this scene would have been ordinary, just another family outing on a hot summer day. Now, it felt like a miracle. Each moment precious, each laugh a gift. As I unpacked our picnic lunch, I noticed Sarah walking along the beach with her husband, Frank. They lived in the next town over, but I hadn't seen her since that winter day when she fled our house. She spotted us, froze for a moment, then changed direction, leading Frank away from our area of the beach. Robert, coming up from the water with Thomas, followed my gaze and saw her too. A shadow crossed his face. "She hasn't been back to town much," I said, as he sat beside me on the blanket. "Her mother says she's been staying with her sister in New Hampshire most weekends." Robert nodded, watching as Sarah disappeared around a bend in the shoreline. "Are you okay? Seeing her, I mean." I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? Did seeing her still feel like a knife twisting in my gut? "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. "Some days I'm angry, some days I'm sad, but most days I'm just grateful." "Grateful?" he asked, surprised. "Grateful that we're here, together, that you're feeling better, that the children are happy." I looked at him steadily. What happened with Sarah nearly broke us. But then cancer came along and gave us perspective, as awful as that sounds. He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. "I promise you, Maggie, if I get through this, when I get through this, I'll spend every day making it up to you." "You already are," I told him, and I meant it. That night, after the children were asleep, Robert and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. The air was still warm, heavy with the scent of summer flowers and freshly cut grass. "Do you remember that night at the harvest dance?" Robert asked suddenly. "When we were 17? I smiled at the memory. "When you finally worked up the courage to ask me to dance after staring at me all night?" He laughed. "I was terrified you'd say no." "I almost did," I admitted. Nancy Baker told me you'd kissed Mary Simmons behind the gym the week before." "I never," Robert protested. "Mary wished I had. But my heart was set on you from the first day of 10th grade. I rested my head on his shoulder, remembering how young we'd been, how full of dreams and plans. We've had a good life, haven't we? Despite everything? The best," he agreed softly. "And it's not over yet, Maggie. Not by a long shot." I wanted so badly to believe him. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, yes, but they'd also been clear that Robert's type of cancer had a high recurrence rate. Even if he was in remission now, the sword of Damocles still hung over our heads. But that night, swinging gently on our porch, fireflies dancing in the summer darkness, I chose hope. I chose to believe in more summers, more dances, more years together. I chose to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, love really could conquer all. Oh my, I've been talking for quite a while now, haven't I? If you're still with me, I appreciate your patience. Don't forget to hit that like button if my story has touched your heart, and subscribe to hear how everything turned out. I'd love to know in the comments if you've ever experienced the kindness of community during your darkest times. Sometimes it's those moments that restore our faith in humanity, isn't it? August brought Robert's 6-month checkup. I remember the tension in the car as we drove to Burlington, both of us quiet, lost in our own thoughts. The what-ifs hung between us like storm clouds. What if the cancer had returned? What if the brief reprieve we'd been experiencing was just that? Brief. "Whatever happens," Robert said as we pulled into the hospital parking lot, "these past few months have been a gift. You and the kids, you've been my reason to fight." I reached across the seat and squeezed his hand. "And we're not done fighting yet, Dr. Reinhardt's office hadn't changed. Same beige walls, same uncomfortable chairs, same old magazines. But this time the news was different. "The X-rays look good, Mr. Wilson," Dr. Reinhardt said, a rare smile crossing his face as he clipped the films to the light board. "I don't see any evidence of the tumor. Your blood work is also encouraging." I felt lightheaded with relief, my hand finding Robert's arm to steady myself. "So I'm cured?" Robert asked, his voice cautious, afraid to hope too much. Dr. Reinhardt's smile dimmed slightly. "I wouldn't use that word yet. With lung cancer, we generally want to see 5 years without recurrence before we talk about a cure. But this is very positive news. I'd like to see you back in 3 months for another set of X-rays, sooner if you experience any symptoms like coughing, chest pain, or shortness of breath. 3 months. A reprieve. A chance to breathe." As we left the hospital, the late summer sunshine felt brighter somehow, the world more vibrant. We stopped at a diner for lunch, a small celebration, splurging on hamburgers and chocolate milkshakes. "I want to go back to work," Robert said, stirring his milkshake with the long silver spoon. "Dr. Reinhardt says I can start with light duties. Mr. Peterson at the mill said they could use me in the office until I'm strong enough for regular shifts." I studied his face, still thinner than before, but with healthy color in his cheeks, life in his eyes. "Are you sure you're ready?" He nodded firmly. "I need to provide for my family again, Maggie. You've carried us for too long." "We've carried each other," I corrected him. The look he gave me then was so full of love and gratitude, it nearly took my breath away. "Yes," he agreed softly. "We have." September found our lives settling into a new routine. Robert working part-time at the mill office, me continuing at the diner 3 nights a week, not because we needed the money as desperately now, but because I'd grown to enjoy the work and the independence it gave me. The children back in school, growing and thriving, despite the shadow that had hung over our family. One evening in late September, I came home from the diner to find the house unusually quiet. No radio playing, no children's voices. Just silence. "Robert!" I called, a flicker of panic rising in my chest. "Kids? Out back, Maggie!" came Robert's voice from the backyard. I went through the kitchen and opened the back door to find our yard transformed. White Christmas lights had been strung between the trees, glowing softly in the deepening twilight. A small table sat in the center of the yard, set for 2 with our good china, the wedding set we saved for special occasions. Robert stood beside it, dressed in his Sunday suit, hair neatly combed. In his hands was a small box wrapped in silver paper. "What's all this?" I asked, stepping into the yard in my diner uniform, suddenly conscious of the coffee stain on my apron. An anniversary, Robert said. Of sorts. I did the mental math quickly. Our wedding anniversary was in April. The children's birthdays were scattered through the year. What anniversary? It's been exactly 7 months since the day you found me with Sarah, he said quietly. 7 months since you had every reason to throw me out, to take off that ring. And 7 months since you chose to stay by my side, even when I didn't deserve it. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Robert, the children are at my mother's for the night, he continued. I wanted us to have this evening together, to celebrate the fact that I'm still here, that we're still here, together. He held out the silver box. For you. Inside was a delicate silver chain, and on it a small heart pendant studded with tiny diamonds that caught the light from the Christmas lights strung above us. It's not much, Robert said, almost apologetically. I've been saving from my paychecks. I wanted to give you something to show you. I silenced him with a kiss, the pendant clutched in my hand. When we finally broke apart, both a little breathless, I whispered, It's beautiful. But you didn't need to give me anything. I wanted to, he insisted, taking the necklace and moving behind me to clasp it around my neck. I wanted something that would remind you every day how much I love you, how grateful I am for your forgiveness. As his fingers brushed my neck, fastening the clasp, I closed my eyes. I didn't stay because I'm a saint, Robert. I stayed because I love you. Because 50 years from now, I want to be sitting on that porch swing with you, watching our grandchildren play in this yard. 50 years, he repeated, coming around to face me again. I like the sound of that. He held out his hand. May I have this dance, Mrs. Wilson? There was no music playing, but it didn't matter. We swayed together under the stars and the twinkling lights, the scent of autumn leaves in the air, holding each other close. I keep thinking about that day, Robert said after a while, his cheek resting against my hair. How different everything would have been if you hadn't come home early. I pulled back to look at him. What do you mean? If you hadn't caught me with Sarah, I might never have gone to the doctor when I started coughing up blood. I might have kept hiding it, kept pretending I was fine. Until it was too late. His voice broke slightly. Your coming home early that day might have saved my life, Maggie. I'd never thought of it that way. The worst day of my life, walking in on my husband's betrayal, might have been the thing that saved him. Sometimes the worst moments lead us to where we need to be, I said thoughtfully. If you hadn't gotten sick, we might not have found our way back to each other after what happened. I would have found a way, Robert said firmly. Cancer or no cancer, I would have fought for you, for us. It just might have taken longer for you to trust me again. I do trust you, I realized as I said it. I really do. And it was true. The pain of his betrayal was still there, a scar rather than an open wound now. But the trust had returned. Not the blind, unquestioning trust of our early marriage, but something deeper, tempered by fire, stronger for having been broken and mended. We danced until the night grew cool, then moved inside to the warmth of our home, the home we'd built together through good times and bad. That night, for the first time since his diagnosis, we made love without the shadow of death hanging over us, without the fear that each touch might be our last. Afterward, lying in the moonlight that spilled through our bedroom window, I asked the question that had been in the back of my mind for months. If you could go back, would you change it? Not the affair, I clarified quickly. The cancer. Would you change getting sick if you could? Robert was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he turned to face me, his expression thoughtful. It sounds crazy, but no, I don't think I would, he said slowly. Before I got sick, I was taking everything for granted. You, the kids, my health, my life. I was sleepwalking, Maggie. The affair with Sarah was a symptom of that. I was looking for something to make me feel alive because I didn't realize how precious what I already had was. He traced my cheek with his finger. Cancer woke me up, made me see what really matters, made me appreciate every sunrise, every moment with the kids, every smile from you. If that's what it took to shake me out of my complacency, then I can't regret it. I understood what he meant, though it seemed impossible that anything good could come from such darkness. Yet here we were, our marriage stronger, our love deeper, our appreciation for life more acute because of what we'd been through. The months passed. Robert's checkups continued to bring good news. He regained his strength, eventually returning to full duties at the mill. I kept my job at the diner, discovering a talent for management that led to a promotion to assistant manager by the spring of 1973. The children thrived. Jimmy joined the baseball team, Rosie discovered a passion for painting, and little Thomas started kindergarten, proudly carrying his lunchbox with cowboys on it. Life went on, as it does, with its ups and downs, its ordinary miracles and everyday challenges. We never forgot how close we'd come to losing it all, both through Robert's infidelity and his illness. That knowledge made us more conscious of nurturing our marriage, of not taking each other for granted. We instituted weekly date nights, even if it was just sharing a pot of coffee at the kitchen table after the children were in bed. We learned to talk about difficult things before they festered. We forgave each other's small failings and celebrated each other's victories, no matter how modest. And through it all, I never took off my wedding ring, the simple gold band that had nearly come off on that winter day in 1972. It stayed on my finger through the dark days of Robert's treatment, through the slow rebuilding of trust, through the years of remission that followed. It's still there today, worn thin from nearly 5 decades of wearing. Just like the love it represents has been worn smooth by time, strengthened by challenges overcome together. Robert and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary 8 years ago, surrounded by our children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren. The cancer never returned. The doctors called it a miracle. We called it a gift. Sarah moved away from Vermont in 1974. I heard she divorced Frank and remarried a few years later. I hope she found happiness. Over time, I came to forgive her completely, understanding that we all make mistakes, all seek connection and love, sometimes in the wrong places. Looking back now, at 78, I can see how that terrible winter day when I found my husband with another woman set in motion a series of events that ultimately saved not just his life, but our marriage. How the worst betrayal led to the deepest healing. How forgiveness became not just a gift I gave Robert, but a gift I gave myself. They say wedding rings are symbols of eternal love. Mine has been more than that. It's been a reminder of choice. The choice I made to stay when it would have been easier to leave. The choice to forgive when it would have been easier to hold on to anger. The choice to love, every day, through the best and worst of times. That's why I never took off this ring, and why, after all these years, I never will. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched your heart in some way, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of life, love, and the lessons I've learned along this long journey of mine. I'd be so grateful if you could leave a comment sharing what resonated with you. After all, sharing our stories is how we connect with one another across time and distance. God bless you, and remember, sometimes what feels like your darkest day might just be the beginning of your greatest blessing.